Look at the calendar, not for the date. Listen. Because on a Wednesday night in Toronto, inside a stadium built to hold 10,000, the chair umpire did something that should never happen in round 2 of an ordinary tournament. He asked for quiet. Once, then again, then over and over until the silence he needed simply refused to arrive. This was not a final. This was not a grand slam. This was the middle of the week, second round, and the player they came for was seated 25th. Think about that number. Not first, not fifth, 25th. And yet the center court was a wall of Philippine flags moving like water through the stands, loud enough that officials could not settle the crowd long enough to play a point. The tickets had vanished in 30 minutes, 30, once the schedule dropped. The tournament director, a man who has run major events for years, said he has never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 generate that kind of gravitational pull, ever. Now rewind exactly 12 months, August 2025, same city on the map, same tournament. Alex Eala was 65th in the world. She played her first round match, lost it, packed her bag and went home. There was no sold-out arena, there were no flags, there was no waiting list. And if you go back through the entire record book of professional tennis, stretching across decades, the Philippines, a nation of 115 million people, had never produced a single WTA champion. Not one trophy, not one moment, an empty case in a very crowded house. So how does that happen? How does a country with no professional tour, no development pipeline, no domestic circuit worth mentioning, and absolutely no precedent walk into a Canadian stadium and take it over? How does a 21-year-old who lost in the first round a year earlier come back and sell 10,000 seats faster than most people can place a dinner order? The noise in Toronto was not about one match. It was not really about tennis at all. Something had been building for years, quietly, painfully, in places most cameras never reached, and it broke the surface in 7 days. By the end of this, you will understand exactly what those 10,000 people were actually cheering for. And I will tell you right now, it is not what the highlight reels want you to believe. But to see it, you have to go back to a January night when Alex Eala won a set 6-0 and still walked off that court beaten. Because if you want to understand what happened in Toronto, you have to understand what she gave up just to be standing there. She was born on the 23rd of May, 2005 in Quezon City. If you grew up in the Philippines, you already know the hierarchy. Basketball is a religion. Boxing is a national inheritance. Volleyball owns every schoolyard. Tennis sits far down the list in a country that never built the roads for it. No pipeline, no professional circuit that matters, no map. So imagine being 9 years old in Manila and deciding tennis is the thing. You are not following a path. There is no path. You are guessing in the dark. She was 13 when she boarded a plane alone to Mallorca, 7,000 miles from the kitchen where her mother cooked, 6 time zones away from her own bed. She went to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy on an island in the Mediterranean, in a language she did not yet speak, chasing a career her country had never produced. At 13, most children are deciding where to sit at lunch. She was deciding where to live. And here is the detail that matters more than any backhand. Her family did not misunderstand the cost. They knew it exactly. Her mother, Riza Maniego, script records her as Rizaman Eala, was a competitive swimmer who won bronze in the 100-meter backstroke at the Southeast Asian Games in 1985. Her father, Mike, is a business executive. Her older brother, Miko, played tennis himself 4 seasons in the United States at Penn State. This household had already run the experiment. They knew exactly where the ceiling usually sits for a Filipino athlete. They knew how many talented kids from that country get close, then stop because the funding dries up, because the system was never there, because the world stops paying attention. They sent her anyway. And now you need to notice something because the tennis coverage misses it almost entirely. There are roughly 10 million Filipinos living outside the Philippines right now. Nurses in Chicago, engineers in Dubai, seafarers on ships crossing every ocean, caregivers in Toronto. Families who packed a suitcase at 19, at 22, at 25, and stepped onto a plane to a country where nobody knew their name, so that someone back home could have a better year. When those people watch a 13-year-old girl fly alone to Spain to chase something her nation had never done, they are not watching a sports story. They are watching a version of their own life with a tennis racket in her hand. The homesickness is the same. The video calls at strange hours are the same. The weight of carrying an entire family's expectation across an ocean. That is the same too. That is why the flags come out. That is why the stands fill up. It was never really about forehands. If you have ever been the one who left or the one who watched someone leave, I want you to drop your city in the comments. I mean it. There is a version of this story in almost every one of them, and I want to see how far this reaches. And if you want the next match, the next crowd, the next scoreline delivered straight to you, hit the subscribe button now. Because what unfolds over the next 3 weeks is going to be worth watching in real time. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. For years, that sacrifice looked like it might not be enough. Talent was never the question. She beat top 10 players. She made headlines. She became famous in her own country before she had won anything that actually counted. And that turned into its own kind of trap, because fame without trophies has a name in professional sport, and it is not kind. In January of this year, in front of an entire nation that had stayed up past midnight to watch, Eala found out exactly how cruel that trap could be. Melbourne, the Australian Open. Her first main draw at a Grand Slam. Understand what that meant back home. The match was scheduled in the dead of night, Philippine time. People set alarms. Families crowded around one phone. Offices streamed it quietly in a browser tab. An entire country stayed awake past midnight to watch a girl they had adopted as their own. Her opponent was an American named Alicia Parks. Big serve, big forehand, streaky, the kind of player who either blows you off the court or collapses under her own weight. The first set was hers. 6 games to love, 6-0. Parks did not win a single point that mattered. At that stage in a professional match, a set won to love is not just a lead, it is a statement. The scoreboard was not close, it was decisive. Back home, people were already sending messages to each other. Then it unraveled. Parks won the second set 6-3, and she took the third 6-2. The final score read, 6-love to open, then 3-6, 2-6. First round over, flight booked home. Sit with that. She won 12 consecutive games worth of tennis in the opening set. Then she lost 15 of the final 21 games, not against a top 10 superstar, not in a quarterfinal, in the first round after being in complete control. So here is the question that followed her around like a shadow, and I need you to keep it in your mind. How do you keep believing in yourself when you have already proved you can dominate anyone, and you still cannot finish? 2 months later, Indian Wells, round of 16, her opponent was Linda Noskova of the Czech Republic, almost exactly her age, born the same year, rising on the same path. The score was 6-2, 6-love, not a competitive loss, a demolition. In the second set, she did not win a game, then June in Berlin on grass. Eala played some of the finest tennis of her young career and reached the semifinals. Waiting there was Noskova again, 6-2, 6-4, gone. 2 meetings that season, 2 straight set defeats. And the deeper you looked, the worse the pattern became. Across her entire career against Czech opponents, her record stood at 1 win and 13 losses. 1-13. Her single victory came against Nicola Bartenkova in a lower-tier final. That is when the conversation around her changed. And it changed fast. Go back to spring 2025, Miami. She ran to the semifinals of a Masters-level event from nowhere and became a global story overnight. Her face was everywhere. Brands lined up. Back home, she went from athlete to national figure in about 10 days, and that is exactly when the phrase started showing up in every article. Flash in the pan, a media moment. A player whose fame arrived years before her results, which, in professional sports, is the most dangerous gap there is. The expectations are set at the ceiling. The career has to climb up and meet them. Look at the ledger. Wins against top 10 opponents? Moments that turned into highlight reels watched around the world? Plenty. Career singles titles on the WTA Tour? 0, not 1. And it was not just her ledger that was empty. For the entire history of the WTA Tour, stretching back to 1970, not a single player from the Philippines, man or woman, had ever lifted a tour-level trophy. Every time she got close, she was not just carrying her own career, she was carrying 115 million people who had never once seen it happen. That is the weight she was walking on to court with, not pressure, debt. By early summer, if you had told an analyst that within 8 weeks this same player would be selling out a 10,000-seat stadium in Canada as a champion, you would have gotten polite, uncomfortable silence. 6 months after Melbourne, she walked onto center court at Wimbledon to face the defending champion. Nobody gave her a real chance. Center court. 14,000 people, almost none of them making a sound between points. Grass cut to 8 millimeters. The scoreboard was understated, almost humble. Everything about the place tells you that it has seen better players than you, and it will see better players long after you are gone. Across the net stood Iga Swiatek, the reigning champion, former world #1, one of the most relentless frontrunners the sport has ever produced. Eala had never been past the second round of a Grand Slam in her life. Then she went through Renata Zarazua, then Maya Joint, and suddenly she was standing on the court she had described as her dream stage, facing a champion in the third round. The first set refused to end. They held serve into a tiebreak, and the tiebreak refused to end with them. Set points saved and saved again. Past 7,
past 8,
past 9. Both athletes hit through nerves that most people will never experience in a lifetime. The score stretched to 11 points to 9. Read that again. In a tiebreak, the first to reach 7 wins, unless it stretches past deuce. This one went all the way to 11-9. That is a scoreline that only happens when neither player will break. And it went to the one who was supposed to be overwhelmed. Then she came out in the second set and won it 6-2. The final score, 7-6, with that tiebreak at 11-9 and then 6-2. The defending Wimbledon champion was out. Alex Eala became the first player from the Philippines ever to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. She did it on the biggest court in the sport with the entire world watching. Now, look past the score line, because if you think the story is that she beat a champion, you are missing it entirely. She had beaten champions before. She had beaten an Olympic gold medalist. She had beaten top 10 players 6 or 7 times over the previous year. Beating great players was never the missing ingredient. Here's the assumption I want to break, and I want you to hear it clearly. For 3 years, almost everyone, including very smart people in tennis, described Alex Eala as a player who lacked consistency. Talented but streaky. Great for a set, then she fades. That was wrong. It was never consistent. It was closing. Look at the pattern honestly. Melbourne, she won a set 6-love, then collapsed. Berlin, she reached the semifinal and was shut down. Over and over, the collapse never came at the start. It came after she got in front. The problem was never finding her level. The problem was what happened to her mind once the finish line came into view and she could actually see it. Think about it like a runner who leads a race for 800 meters and gets caught on the final turn. You would not say that runners lack speed. She has more speed than the people passing her. What she does not have yet is the ability to run while knowing she is about to win. Those are completely different skills. Only one shows up in a highlight reel. So what actually changed on that grass court was not her forehand. It was that she took a 2-set victory over the defending champion, went up in a tiebreak that stretched to 11 points, felt the entire match tightening around her like a wire, and she did not let go. Then she came out and won the second set 6-2. She did not survive the lead. She extended it. That is the moment. Not upset. The finish. Afterward, in the on-court interview, she admitted she was emotional. She spoke about how many times she had dreamed of a moment like winning that first set, and she said that when those chances finally come, you have to take them, because simply being there is already a blessing. Then she thanked the crowd, specifically. She told them the atmosphere they created was part of it. That line is easy to skip past. Do not skip it. That was the first time the noise became a weapon instead of a weight. If you always believed her problem was consistency, say so in the comments. If you were one of the few who spotted the closing problem before Wimbledon, I want to hear that too, because there were not many of you, and you deserve the credit. Now, if I am right about this, then the results after Wimbledon should look very different. Not more upsets, not more flashes. They should look like domination, and they do. Washington, just days ago. In the first round, she beat the Olympic gold medalist, Jung Chinwen. Then she beat Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of that very tournament. Then she beat Alina Svitolina, the second seed, by the exact same score she had beaten her in Berlin, 6-3, 6-4. Then she beat Naomi Osaka in the semifinal, 4-time Grand Slam winner. 4 matches, Olympic champion, defending champion, second seed, Grand Slam legend. That is not a good week. That is the demolition of an entire draw. Then came the final, Jessica Pegula, world #3, the top seed. Pegula won the opening set 6-4. Then the rain came. Play was suspended with Pegula holding a set lead and carrying momentum into the second. The match was pushed to Monday. Apply the old pattern, down a set, momentum with the opponent. An overnight delay alone in a hotel room with the biggest match of her life half lost. Behind her, 115 million people waited for a trophy that had never existed in their history. That is the exact situation that used to break her. She came back Monday and won the second set 6-4. Then she won the deciding set 6-love. 6 straight games. In the final of her first career title match against the third-ranked player in the world, she ran the table. The final score, 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. That was her first WTA Tour title in the history of the Philippines. She also became the first Southeast Asian player ever to win a WTA 500 event. She called it an incredible milestone, and that was the understatement of the year. That is not a player who lacks consistency. That is a player who learned to finish, tested under the worst possible conditions, and passed. But there is a second piece of evidence, and it is the one the Toronto crowd was really about. At the DC Open, the moment she reached the final, tickets sold out within the hour. Then she flew to Toronto. She landed the day after winning her first title, walked into her press conference, and said the previous 24 hours had been amazing, that there were so many emotions to process, and that she was excited to reset. She had 2 days between cities. The tournament announced her Wednesday night match, center court against Alicia Parks, the same woman who had beaten her in Melbourne in January. The seats disappeared in 30 minutes, 10,000 of them, for a second-round match for the player seeded 25th. Carl Hale, who runs that tournament, put it plainly, they have never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 generate this effect. And she delivered, 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. She broke Parks twice in a fast opening set, dropped the second when her level dipped, then reset. She broke to open the third and closed by winning the last 4 games in a row. 6 matches won in a row across 2 countries. She became the first Filipino player, male or female, to ever win a main draw match at that tournament. There it is again, trailing pressure, third set. And she finished. The flags filled the stands. The umpire kept asking for quiet in what reporters described as a party atmosphere. And the very first thing she did when it ended was turn to the crowd and ask them in Tagalog to wave their flags so she could see them. She told them there were so many Filipinos out there, so many flags. Thank you, she said. She told them she was eternally grateful that she had just come from Washington and that this felt like a celebration. Then she got emotional. She told them that every single week she sees them supporting her. Every week she witnesses how much Filipinos love their own people. And she said it makes her incredibly proud to be Filipino. Mahal ko kayong lahat, she said. I love you all. Now here's the part I have not heard a single broadcaster say out loud, and it is the most important sentence in this entire story. That crowd is not a byproduct of her rise. It is an accelerant. Think about what selling out in 30 minutes actually forces a tournament to do. It forces the schedulers to put her in the night session on center court in the prime television window every single week. That is not a courtesy. That is business. Which means a 21-year-old currently ranked 20th in the world is now playing almost every match in the exact conditions that only the top 5 usually experience. Full stadium. Cameras everywhere, nowhere to hide. A crowd loud enough that an umpire has to intervene repeatedly. Most players spend 5 or 6 years working up to that environment gradually. Eala was dropped into it before she had won her first title, and she has been living in it every week since. And remember what her actual weakness was. Not talent. Closing. Handling the moment when the wind comes into view and the pressure lands. She is being force-fed that exact pressure at maximum volume by her own supporters, match after match. The crowd is not just cheering, the crowd is training her. That brings us all the way back to that umpire in Toronto, begging 10,000 people to settle down. Because what he was up against was never really noise. So why were they that loud? Because for the first time in the history of this sport, they finally had someone to be loud for. That is the entire answer. 10 million Filipinos live outside the Philippines. Every one of those cities, Toronto, Chicago, Dubai, Sydney, is a stadium waiting to be activated. Nobody had ever activated them. Eala did not build that audience. She unlocked it. And no marketing budget can manufacture what she just did, because you cannot create 10 million people who already feel like they know you. Leila Fernandez, whose mother is Filipina, said it after her own match in Toronto. The Filipino community is super proud of anyone who comes from that country. She has felt it herself. So this stopped being a ranking story a long time ago. A 21-year-old is redrawing the commercial map of women's tennis, and this tour is only now starting to notice. Now here is where it goes next, and the timeline is brutal. On Saturday, she plays Katie McNally, American, unseeded, and the woman who just produced the biggest upset of the tournament by knocking out the reigning Wimbledon champion, Linda Noskova. She did it from 5 games down in the opening set, taking a tiebreak 7-6, then rolling the second set 6-1. They have never played each other, not once. If she wins that, she reaches the 4th round of a 1,000-level event for the first time in her life. Behind McNally, the draw opens into Coco Gauff. Behind Gauff, Aryna Sabalenka. Then on Thursday night, she is also playing doubles alongside Venus Williams, which is a sentence that still does not fully compute. 3 weeks from now, New York, the U.S. Open. The loudest crowd in tennis in a city with one of the largest Filipino communities in North America, with a player who has finally learned how to finish. If 10,000 people showed up in Toronto on a Wednesday night for round 2, what exactly is going to happen inside Arthur Ashe? I do not know the answers. Nobody does. But I know we are going to find out inside of a month. And I know the version of this story you get from a 30-second highlight clip is going to miss everything that actually matters. So stay with this. We are covering every match, every crowd, every scoreline, all the way through New York. And if you want the answer delivered the moment it arrives, not 3 days late, subscribe right now. One last thing, because I am genuinely curious how far this reaches. In the comments, tell me exactly where you were when you watched this start. Not just the country, the city, Toronto, Jersey City, Daly City, Dubai, Manila, wherever you were. Let's see how big this actually is.